Private equity funds like to pride themselves on proprietary deal flow. But the dirty secret is that most of the deals they do are still shopped. But here's the thing. Just because deals are shopped isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're the seller. Stay to the end and I'll tell you why. Private equity deals are sourced in one of two ways. It's either proprietary deal flow or it's shopped deal flow. Let's first start with shopped deal flow. What do I mean by shopped deal flow? Well, think about it like this. You go shopping and you look at lots of different opportunities. Or vice versa, somebody comes around door to door and, they are shopping to you this opportunity that they have. That's effectively what happens with shop deals. They're usually run by an investment bank. That investment bank will have found a deal and they represent the seller in that deal. Then that investment bank will really be there to guide that company through the sales process. In a lot of ways, an investment bank is like a realtor, but for businesses. So they'll dig into your numbers, they'll help you put together your data room, put together your full diligence package, and make you look as pretty as possible. Just like a realtor will come to your house, run the numbers, help stage the house if there isn't furniture, put on open houses, clean things up, take beautiful pictures, drone photography, all videos, all of that fun stuff. Investment bankers are effectively doing the same thing. They want to make you look as good as possible in front of potential acquirers. Then the reason you hire an investment bank is because they have relationships with lots of different private equity funds. And those private equity funds, if it's a good investment bank, will trust to some degree the word of the investment banker. So the investment banker can come and say, hey, we've got this great investment opportunity for you. And here's why. It's a company that's growing by 50% year over year and has great EBITDA margins and not too much customer concentration and blah, blah, blah. And what they'll do is they'll go to a bunch of different private equity funds. They'll give them a teaser. They'll give them a little bit of detail about it. If the private equity firm is interested, then they'll sign an NDA and they'll say, okay, give me more details. They'll look through the diligence package. Maybe they'll even do a call with the owner of the business or the C-suite of the business. And then after that, if they still like it, then they enter into what's called a bake-off or bidding process, where a number of different private equity firms will submit bids on the maximum amount that they would pay for that business. And all these bids come in, and then the owner meets with the investment bank, and the investment bank helps them select, which of those different private equity firms they really want to narrow it in on, or the one that they really want to work with. And then they'll help represent the seller in that negotiation process, helping them get the best deal possible. And look, it's not always about getting the highest price. It could be a situation where like the founder or the owner really wants the business to stay in the community where he or she built it. Or maybe they want to have a second bite of the apple, as they say, where they don't sell the entire business, but they sell, 80% of it, and they retain 20% and have the opportunity to sell the next time when the private equity fund sells, as a way to generate, additional returns on their investment. So there could be a bunch of different structural things, and the investment banker kind of helps in that whole process. Well, that's shopped deals. And as you can imagine, when a deal is shopped to lots of different private equity funds, and there are lots, and it's an attractive deal, then there are going to be lots of funds kind of vying with each other to get access to that deal and pay top dollar to do so. The flip side of that is proprietary deals. Now, proprietary deals are deals where the private equity fund has a proprietary, or they are the sole ones to have a relationship with that company. And ultimately what that translates to is that hopefully they get a better deal. Now, for the entrepreneur and the owner of the business, it is possible that they get a slightly better deal because they're not paying fees to investment bankers. And so sometimes you'll have really sophisticated owners of businesses that won't work with an investment bank and will just go directly with the private equity fund. Even then, I think there's a tremendous amount of value to working with an investment bank to help represent you and to play that like intermediary that can, have the hard conversations without hurting the relationship, if that makes sense. So even then, in those cases where it's proprietary deal flow, having an investment banker, if you're the owner selling your business, can be incredibly valuable. And so I highly recommend spending some time to search out a good investment banker to represent you during that process, as well as good attorneys, frankly. Nonetheless, proprietary deal flow is important to private equity funds because it's through this proprietary deal flow that hopefully they can get better deals, ones that aren't shopped to a million different funds. and by doing so, get a better deal overall and generate better returns. Now, how do private equity firms develop this proprietary deal flow? Well, honestly, there are a bunch of different ways in which they can do it. A lot of them will have large call centers effectively of analysts that are just calling entrepreneurs. And so if you run a small business, there's a good chance that you've received a letter or a phone call from some analyst at some private equity shop that's, they got just a long list of companies and they're calling every single one. And sure, be flattered, but the reality is they're probably not that interested in your business. They just don't know anything about it and want to learn more. Other ways in which private equity funds will create proprietary deal flow is through their own relationships or networks that they build. So sometimes you'll have industry experts that are, head of different organizations and alliances and, business organizations and so forth. And through those organizations, they've developed relationships with lots of different companies, with service providers and others. And while I'm talking about service providers, that's another way in which private equity funds will source proprietary deal flow is through these service providers. So those service providers might be like lawyers, it could be accountants, and others that help get them connected to companies that are really interesting. Because again, if they can get in with that company before the company goes and start shopping their company to other private equity funds, oftentimes they can get a better deal. Ultimately, these private equity firms will do whatever they can to get an edge on sourcing that deal because, again, it helps them if they're the only buyer for the business, which is to a disadvantage to the seller, which is why I tend to recommend that you work with a good investment bank to help you get the best deal, even if you know who you want to sell to. What does an investment banker charge? Well, you should be prepared to pay roughly 2 to 4% of the overall transaction size. So if you sell your company for $100 million, it's not uncommon to be writing a $2 million check to your investment bankers for their work. Ultimately, a good investment banker will get you the best price while also meeting your own personal objectives, and they'll hold your hand and guide you through the process. My recommendation on finding a good investment bank is really to look at investment bankers that have done transactions in your same industry. So if you know of another company in your industry that's been acquired recently or gone public or sold to a private equity fund, then look at the investment bank that helped them in that journey. Then look at the investment bank and see how many other deals they have done that were similar to that. Ultimately, you want an investment bank that understands your business really well and that has the connections to the right investors that are excited to invest or to acquire your type of business. Sometimes I'll see, companies work with really small investment banks that don't have the reach of investors that is necessary to get a really good buyer for your business. And sometimes I'll see investment bankers that don't have the experience to know how to appropriately underwrite a company because it's in an industry or sector that's unfamiliar to them. And the problem with that is that they're not going to have the same level of credibility with potential acquirers that somebody that's in the space and has done a lot of these transactions will have. Ultimately, I believe you get what you pay for in a lot of cases here. And so be prepared to pay up, but just, know that if you're willing to pay up, you might pay more in fees, but ultimately you're going to get a much bigger, better transaction. Another way that can be helpful in terms of finding an investment banker is finding a good lawyer and asking them who they have found to be successful and really professional in working through deals as well. There are a lot of different investment banks out there. There's one for pretty much every sector. And then, of course, you have your bulge brackets. If you're a company that's looking to sell you your business for north of $100 million, then it might make sense talking to some of the bulge bracket investment banks, your Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley's, etc. And each one of those big bulge bracket investment banks, they're not just like one big monolith. They usually have smaller groups. And within those groups, you want to find the managing director that best fits your business. So some will have like a healthcare team, some will have a tech team, some will have just a pure M&A team. Really kind of depends on what you're looking for. And know that in many cases, private equity funds are also hiring investment banks to represent them as well to go out and find deal flow. So there's a little bit of give and take, just like there are realtors that help people buy a house, same as there are realtors that help them sell a house. Anyways, hopefully this was a helpful overview of how private equity works, how they source deals, and the role of investment bankers throughout that process. If you've enjoyed this video, check out my video, How to Start a Private Equity Firm with No Money, and get some insight on the other side of the table. Thanks.